you are gonna see some cool ass shit.
Yeah, you don't want two Flavor Flays.
Heart transplants, brain surgeries. I've seen it all.
Dude, that's fucking dope.
Walk up and just get it, whatever it is.
Yeah, brother.
I'm trying not to laugh, bro, but Josh is fucking killing me.
Guess what Navy SEALs do, motherfucker? They communicate and they're on the same fucking page.
Whoa.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the Happy Hoodlums podcast, everybody. It's your host, Kemper Woodruff, and Mr. Zachary Sampson. Flexing hard, baby. So we're back for another week. It's episode 99 in this bitch. And we're just rolling. So
Yeah.
I had a good day today, and I was talking with Zach, and we were just kind of working on some stuff and kind of preparing for the next season of Happy Hoodlums. And I was telling him that I just kind of want to give more, and 'tis the season after all. But no, just in general with my life, I just want to give more of myself to the world. And we've been on here talking about being authentic and sharing your craft and who you are. And so I'm finally ready to put out more than I did in the past. And I feel that I'm in a place, discipline wise, where creativity is flowing and just that desire is there to where I want to give to other people, because I find myself needing to create and put myself in a positive mental space each day. So I don't want to just like keep that to myself, because I know it literally drags me out of, a state of like suffering into just like supreme gratitude for life. And if I can leave a breadcrumb trail, I feel that's really important, especially me being a father and having lost my father. Like I understand that the more breadcrumbs you can leave, because you never know how precious time is, the better. And so, in lieu of that, Zach and I have designed some stuff so I can start putting out some writings and some quotes on my own Instagram. Side note, I have a new Instagram, and it's New Day KEMP, which is going to be an acronym. You know what I mean? It's not just Kemp. It's keep everything moving positively.
I thought when
Mhm.
when I heard it, I was like, keep everyone more positive.
Hey, I like that too.
Yeah. It
But
flows.
to me, it's keep everything moving positively. So it's kind of in that same exact vein, bro. Um, and I realized that I wanted to start over for a couple reasons. Um, I feel like uh, I want to give things out in a more perfected and like organic way, and something that's good to the people that are interacting with the content I put out. And full disclosure, get your hate hats on, all right? If you got some haterade, start drinking now. Basically, I was curious. I'd heard so many people talking about like buying subscriptions and shit, and I was always like curious how that shit worked. And so someone had hit me up when they saw one of the posts that I did, and it was probably like a bot or like some company or whatever. It was like, would you like promotion? And I was curious just how it worked. He was like, it's like $30. So I gave the dude $30. And then from that point on, whenever I would post some shit, there would always be like bots that would automatically comment on my shit. And I just had like this annoying stream of bots, which made me really like just avoid interacting and really like putting out content on Instagram. So I wanted to like scrap that. And the flip side of it is I wanted anyone that finds me, and that's like, I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I've grown, and I'm just a new version of me. And so the people I want in my life are people that fuck with me, and those people will not only seek you out if you mean something to them, and they'll think about you and be like, oh, I haven't seen that person shit in a long time or whatever, and add you back. Or hopefully, they find my stuff and my work, and I'll let my work speak for me in a way that interpersonally I don't really feel inclined to share all the time, you know? Um, so that's the news bulletin of the day for me for Happy Hoodlums coming into the next year. And Zach's handiwork is great on it. So he doesn't really have much to add, but that's just, we'll leave that there. Anyway, now into the episode, motherfuckers. So I was hanging out with my mom, and she was talking to me about how her blood pressure was kind of high,
Okay.
and so I was like, you just need to chill out a little bit. And she was like, maybe I need to eat a weed gummy. I was like, that's a great place to start. So my mom basically got high on edibles, and I just kicked it with her today and just kind of chaperoned her around. We took the dog for a walk, and I was just making her laugh and just kind of talking about life and looking at trees and shit that you do when you're really fucking high,
Yeah.
and just appreciating the scenery. Um, and so that was a really good day for me, and it made me realize how much I appreciate life, um, and just sharing it. And I also had a similar realization, but on a whole other, like, deeper level, about my daughter when I was just watching a video of her smile and being able to hold her bottle on her own for the first time, just like how proud she was. And I've watched that video so many times. I watched, that's a big way that I can kind of connect. And dude, that made me so grateful for life. I kind of had this realization of, like, this is what it's all about. Like, I didn't even know what living was about until I had a child.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's only hitting me more and more as I go, but it's like and I don't know if it's this way for everybody, but her mother is just a magical woman, and, like, from the moment I met her, I just had a different feeling about her than anyone on planet Earth. It was like I was meeting for the first time. I knew I wasn't alone. you know the way her soul felt, it was like, oh, okay, like, there are people that resonate, and it's like literally, when I find that feeling of, like, being at peace and, like, oneness with God, like, I feel that through connection with you in, like, our bond. And I don't know if that's because I was, that was a sign to, like, pursue this so I could have a daughter with her, or what it is, on a higher level. I guess I'll find that out when I die, or, at some point when I talk to God about it and get some actual word feedback or whatever. But I just know the feeling of, like, purpose and things that carry meaning. And today I had a hell of an epiphany, a heavenly epiphany, rather, because I was just looking at this little angel's face, just like, oh man, I didn't even know life could be this cool. So, yeah, I had an interesting day today, for sure. Exploring freedom. You ever find anything that, gives, or has anything, like, given you that zest for life back, or, like, appreciation on a deeper level? It doesn't have to be recent, but just, like, any kind of moments that just kind of struck you and you're like, ah, this is what it's all about. Because in a strange way, I feel like, and I don't think it's necessarily strange. I think it's just that the universe is a paradox. Like, in letting go, you find connection.
Yeah.
And I just have had a bunch of, like, releasing more and more, um, in order to keep myself in that connected state. And it's given me, like, a freedom and appreciation for, like, life. Um, and I guess to tie this into something else that might kind of stir some thoughts for you is like where that's come for me also in like recent times is uh all the wars that are going on, you
Hmm.
know, with Ukraine and Russia and now Israel and Palestine and stuff, or Hamas, whatever, you know what I mean? It's made me start looking into like history more. Uh I've always loved history because when I was little my dad wouldn't let us watch things for like no reason. He gave no fucks about us watching like gory things if there was a reason. Um, but if we were turning on the TV, it had to be like History Channel or some shit like that.
Yeah.
So I watched a ton of history, and that largely is driven by war, you know? So I really got into like war history and like conflicts early. Um, but I discovered that there was a series I meant to watch years and years and years ago about John Adams on HBO, and it's still on there.
Hmm.
So I've been watching this John Adams HBO show, and it's blowing my mind and giving me like such an appreciation for American history and the freedoms that we're able to experience on a whole other level that I like am seeing now being threatened in the world more and more in a sense. Um, even just through like social media and um, like propaganda campaigns where people are kind of imposing all different kinds of beliefs that are causing people to feel that they can't express themselves authentically in the same way um, because of such scrutiny. And I think that's a level of freedom of expression um, that's largely in jeopardy. And part of that is also playing into why I want to give more, especially through art and just my own voice. Um,
Yeah.
but did that kind of jostle anything?
Well, like the whole idea of people not being able to like openly share their opinions anymore is uh essentially is it's it keeps people from doing what you said in terms of freedom of expression, but also like the freedom of speech, which goes into the freedom of expression. Um, but the way that I see it is like, especially with like cancel culture and people going back, which hasn't happened in the mainstream for a few years, but people going back in time and retroactively canceling people for things that they tweeted in like 2015 or 2010 and shit. Um, and the way that I've always told people this is if you believe that cancel culture is and retroactively punishing people is the way to go, then you fully support the way that our prison system currently runs. Like you don't also support prison reform because people if you think people can't change from the things that they said in 2010, but then you also want people to also like come out of prison for the things that they've done, it's a little bit like counterintuitive in a sense because
Mm-hmm.
you're punishing people for simply speaking their mind, which is their First Amendment right. And then you're going more lenient on the people who literally break laws.
Yeah.
And so that's the way that like our current even now actually the current culture is way more lenient on that now with all the cities who've defunded police, right? Portland being one of them, DC being one of them. I read an article today. An FBI agent was carjacked in Washington, D.C. And all these other places and cities have rampant crime that's going up, and nothing's being done about it. And then you see that in comparison with like all the cancel culture shit and all the suppressed freedom of speech. And it's not even the government doing it anymore, because what it seems like is that the government started it seems like the government started the cancel culture um to create a self censorship within like the citizens now, because now it's
Mm-hmm.
like people say this, then people attack and try and cancel and suppress and ruin your life, and then now people are afraid to say certain things or speak out about certain things. And so it's not just that we're currently losing those types of things and those types of freedoms, it's that we've essentially almost already have, because
Yeah.
of the amount of people that take part in this type of thing. And it's on both sides. It's left and right. I've seen the people on the right try to cancel people on the left, and this vice versa. And it's like, why are people doing this? Why?
It's
What happened to like civil discourse?
it's interesting that like radical change is available to anyone, um, but the ability to change rapidly is really hard on the contents of everything within that person, or just social structure, whatever it is, right? Um, and what I mean by that is, for instance, in my life, right, I might have had an incredible encounter with like the Holy Spirit and felt a radical change take place within me,
Hmm.
but I still had really janky habits that took a long time to kind of like unravel themselves.
Hmm.
And I think as long as we're in a body, everyone's going to be a contradiction to a certain point. And we just have to accept that like people are trying to be better, and like where freedom comes in is like we need like a minimal amount of rules to keep people um like cordial, I guess, and like so we're not just like killing each other and crazy debauchery going on left and right,
Hmm.
in a way that's like socially accepted, I guess you could say. But we need the ability to fuck up and to change, and to understand that like the person that you were a moment from now isn't gonna, or you're the person you were a moment ago isn't who you are now once you've experienced something. And sometimes it just like people change at different times and different rates, but when society changes, and it's really interesting, especially like with COVID, I was thinking about this today, things have started to change much more rapidly, and enforcement of things. But again, like I said, the contents of the container, which are like the people of the US or around the world, right? The contents of the society being people, that shit is really fucking hard to do. Um, just because you have so much momentum and habitual living, you know, that when you adjust all of that, it fucks up a lot of the psyche and the ability to know like how do I interact again, you know, what's socially acceptable. And to kind of just close this thought off, I was thinking about the 6 feet rule, because I was getting some pizza and I was just looking at this sign that said everybody stand like 6 feet apart. And I was kind of thinking about this from like a conspiracy theory ish level, right? And one of the things that's very interesting is that the space that we emanate our like magnetic field is 6 feet. You can go further beyond that, but in general, it's like 6 feet is what they say in like science. So if you're trying to like distance people and test social stability and everything, keeping people at a minimum of 6 feet apart is a great way to fucking start. And I was just looking at it like, fuck, bro, it's so by design. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, they did that, and then they took away 95% of our face.
Yeah.
So you couldn't see smiles anymore. It was all eyes and words, and you couldn't see nuance in the face of somebody, like, you know. But not to mention, that doesn't even make any sense. Half the shit that they fucking told us to do during COVID shit didn't make any sense. The fucking masks didn't work. You could blow smoke through them, and smoke particles are way fucking bigger than COVID particles. And then the fucking 6 feet thing, it's like, oh, okay, so fucking air doesn't travel distance. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. And then, not to mention, like, not pushing the health aspect and eating right and taking vitamins, and instead they were handing out fucking french fries and burgers and donuts at vaccination posts. And it's like, what exactly was the whole purpose of all of that? And then the fucking vaccine itself doesn't actually do anything. Fucking, so it's like,
Jump Street, like when they were like, "Are you gonna take a vaccine?" I was like, "You mean they just pulled this fucking vaccine out of their ass?" I was like,
out of
first of all,
nowhere.
and this is clearly created in a lab. You know, not only were there like scientists saying that shit, but I was like, all right, so I'm just expected to just take this shit because no, dude, I'm not. They need to test that on people first, and they
The
did,
fucking people
but
were the test.
yeah.
There was no
Before we
testing.
get
It was
off
like, oh, this is safe because we said it's safe. It's like, the fuck?
But before we go too far down this rabbit hole, I'm gonna kind of rein this back in to this
Yeah.
John Adams show that I was watching, because as I was watching it, and it's got like Paul Giamatti as like John Adams and tons of other people, and it's like it it was fucking awesome, the casting that they did. Um, but as I'm watching this show, this is after John Adams was selected to be the dude that goes and talks to King George III, who is like the King of England at the time, right?
Yeah.
And he's like the ambassador. We've won our independence and everything at this point. Um, and he's going to talk to him. And he has this dialogue with the king, and the king says back to him, and I quote, "I pray, Mr. Adams, that the United States does not suffer unduly from its want of a monarchy." And that is such a fucking profound and fascinating statement, because, you know, he's kind of saying that, like, yes, you guys are like descendants of like the the monarchical structure, of England, right? You guys want all your independence, and yet the way that you're gonna like create this structure is gonna constantly desire to have a system of power imposed upon you. And really, that shit like blew my mind when I was listening to it. um and it turns out that's an actual quote that they happen to use in the show, because when he said it, I was like, whoa, 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 I gotta look that shit up. Did he actually say that shit to him? And turns out he did. uh but yeah, really interesting, really, really interesting to see that, like, people want to be ruled is essentially what he's saying, and they want like some sort of like prestige, um to be the thing that like rules them, and that in not having that, the discovery of like trying to create order outside of that structure that still somewhat mimics that structure is going to come with a lot of fucking death. And that shit blew my mind to think about.
Most people want someone to tell them what to do. And that's why most people are okay with the repetitiveness of their life. Is because it's someone telling you what to do. It's like, all right, I go to work. From work, I'm being told what to do at all times. and then it's just the repeat of that.
I think people want the feeling that that actually is working, but they don't feel fulfilled by it. Because I think if you look at the human mind, what we are creatures of habit to an extent, and what we do is seek to understand patterns and then to overcome the pattern at a certain point. You know, when that monotonous thing that once made sense to do no longer makes sense.
Hmm.
And that's like just the evolution of like consciousness. And it's very interesting to me that people, you're right in that like they wish that someone would tell them like go do this thing, and they go do that thing and they find fulfillment, but it doesn't work that way. You know, everyone's path is just unique, and I think that's the power of like expression and artwork and just I think the way you live is an art. And some people make really shitty art out of it. And one of the things that I've kind of ran into in my life, at least, that fucked me up was that I love video games. I always have. But I can no longer play video games because of the repetitive nature of them. I get bored with it way quicker than I used to. Like I can binge out, and then it's like I hit this wall where I'm like, I can't do it no more.
Hmm.
And I just fucking pull the parachute. So I don't know that I could even play a video game all the way through anymore. Um,
Well, that's because you're playing one. You got to have multiple.
I guess, but it's just like on the one hand, there's like a simple joy that's like nostalgic to it, right?
Hmm.
And it can be the most basic of games, like fucking Pokemon, you know? And they've pimped out Pokemon. Like that is way more doper than it was when I was little. Um, Graphically and just the way you navigate the world and stuff. But I was playing it and I was like, I got to this point where I was like, what is the point? And I think it's that I look at time and like purpose differently now. And
Hmm.
I think there comes a time when like your desire to contribute um might outweigh just having your own personal pleasure. And I think that's what I've come to. Um is that there's a certain amount of it that I remain like in a state of dissatisfaction about. And maybe that's like uh too lofty and that not everyone's going to think like I have to change the world. I don't know if everyone lives that way, but I've had a deep feeling in me that I am like destined and was born and my mission is to change the world ever since I was little. It's something that I told my mom even when I was like 3 years old was like I'm going to change the way people treat each other. Which is a fucking weird thing for like a 3 or 4 year old to tell their mom. But that was
Hmm.
like the type of shit that I was kind of on ever since I was little. But I just got really frustrated and I've gone through like many bouts. And I still had like I guess somewhat of a normal childhood in the things that I would get into. Um but I think that's what's made me kind of like a wild child and like wanting to explore shit and know why and how things work and why things happen. Um, and at a certain point, you just want to make better things happen. and contribute beautifully to the world. Something that makes somebody's world better. Because I know that everyone lives in some sort of state of suffering, you know, and I just want to give them a break from that form of reality, and see that there's this greater option, I guess, or more enjoyable option of how to be, and just this sense of wholeness that you can get even while shit is like completely fucked up. And that's like this art to me, and that's what freedom is about, is like allowing things to not necessarily be perfect but strive for perfection, and appreciate it all. Appreciate that some people are not going to speak the same language as you.
I think that word perfection needs to be changed. I don't think people
Mm,
should be using it because people who title themselves as perfectionists oftentimes are insecure, and that's why they're a perfectionist. Because
mm,
why else would you need everything to be perfect? You're
yeah,
insecure about this one aspect of your life. I don't think perfection is the word that you should be using. I think your perfection should be switched out for something like I don't know. I can't think of a
seeking
word.
excellence, kind of, because that's what you're really talking about, is seeking excellence and acceptable
Yeah,
excellence.
maybe acceptable excellence. Um, but I think that also is still too close to perfection because when you put your when you put yourself, this is an ego thing. When you put yourself in a position of saying, "I'm gonna achieve this crazy great shit," that is, in other words, utter perfection in my mind. It's like, why does it need to have such a high? Why do you need such a high bar in order to continue to do better? Why do you have to have that specific? Why do you need to have an end goal for you to do better? There is like, don't have an end goal or an image that you want yourself to be. Just do it. Just do better for yourself. Don't don't
I
don't claim that there's, because a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll also use the idea of perfectionist or perfection as a way to not do something. It's like, well, I'm not
Oh
going to
yeah,
be
like
able to get it perfect, so I'm not going to do it, right?
never put it out type shit.
Exactly. And so that's
Yeah.
another reason why I say we shouldn't be using the word perfection.
Well, that
Even saying perfection is flawed is a bad thing to say because that's a contradiction. No one thinks of perfection as flawed. Even if you say the words perfection means it's flawed. That's not that's not helpful to anybody because everyone just hears perfection. I think it's
mm,
honestly a negative term. I don't
that's
think it helps
interesting.
people.
I agree that I don't think that it helps people um, achieve perfection, because I think when you truly get it right, you die. Like when you truly get it right, like and and this journey has like given you what you came here for, your journey continues on in a different form. That's how I look at it. And um I'm someone who, like, that perfectionist thing, like everything that you just described, like that used to be how I was, which is why now I'm like, I've fallen in love with the process of um doing things, and just giving something, and the bravery that it takes, in a sense.
Well, yeah, you
um
took away the word perfection and you did exactly what I was just talking about was rather than needing to be perfect. You just started doing better. You just tried to be
Yeah.
better. That's all. That's what you switched it to.
You know, one of the things that really impacted me recently was I was listening to my teacher Lydia Yuknovich,
Hmm.
and if you've never read her books, anyone that's listening, The Chronology of Water is like square one, incredible, earth-shattering, like literature. I would recommend reading it because it's poetry mixed with an autobiography, and it's really fucking abstract, but it's very raw and just it makes you feel, and it's just life encapsulated and segmented, and it's like a story told in multiple fragments, and it's kind of just a beautiful, beautiful book. Um, but she was saying in this interview and podcast that she was on, never surrender was the best advice that she got, and it came from her teacher Ken Kesey. Um, Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters was uh, like commissioned back in the like I want to say 50s or 60s by I believe the FBI. It was either FBI or CIA to test acid on people. Um, and they drove this bus and would pick people up and test acid on them and not tell them and just like record
That's
what
what they did with
happened.
Manson, except the other way
Um,
around.
and
They would
he
kidnap
wound
people.
up being the guy that wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Um, but anyways, they he told her never surrender, and what she's kind of carried on is like never surrender is really about um, being true to who you are and what you have to give, and not surrendering to what people's influence because it is upon it with your opinion,
Hmm.
you know, and just contributing and by being who you are and giving what you want to give in the image that you have because that's the only real thing that you have in life in a sense. um like you can have all these other things but they're not unique to you the way that your vision is and your desire to be something in life. So I think like that's why it's important to have a vision. And if you have that vision and you have envisioned it, then like being true to it in your best ways, giving what you can and knowing that like that is possible. Like that is the realest thing in your world. And even if it doesn't appear to be right now, you don't have to worry about all that. You just have to give and do and be who you are, not try to be something bigger than you are, because there is nothing bigger than you are. Like, trying implies that you aren't. And the truth is, when you feel whole, when you feel full, you feel one. You feel oneness. It never gets bigger than one. And that same one exists in everything around you. And you can feel that same connection and fulfillment within yourself by experiencing life with another because that same spirit in you also lives in them. And it's a different reality, a different version of the same thing. And it's beautiful. And that's kind of like what life is all about connecting with. And you do it just by being who you really are. And that's why freedom's fucking important. And that's why no one can take that from you. You have to surrender it. But if you never surrender it, you you live a life that's fulfilling. But if you choose to give that up, that real one real thing that you have within yourself, then you're living a life that's worse than being dead because it's worthless. In that it's it's worth less than you are. Because who you really are is this. And like, just don't ever sell out that thing. And I think we all do. We go through seasons of that. And that's one of the most impactful things in my life. And like when I went to New York and I really had that experience of like the Holy Spirit, was I looked at all the morals that I had and all the how much of myself I sold out because I had a fucked up image of myself, you know? And I was trying all these different things on, like they were clothes, like different ways of living that just weren't my style, you know? And I thought I could fit in with it, you know? But I never did. I never felt in. I always felt out on like a misfit, like I wasn't there, you know? I couldn't accept myself in those forms. And that's why it's like I think it's a very freeing and liberating experience to just be who you are and give what you have to give the way you want to give it and be okay with people not fucking with it, you know? Be okay if not everyone sees it, but give it authentically and as pure as you can. You know, be pure with your art and with your intentions and understand that you're going to make mistakes and we all make mistakes and we don't understand things, especially things that are really important to us, things that people are told to keep under wraps, you know, what they want to fight for, what they feel with their sexuality, all these things, you know, how they believe the universe, you know, and everything came to be. Like all those things are almost like we all know they exist and we keep it all surface level and don't really get into like the nitty gritty of it because it weirds people out, you know? People can have very different views. And yet we're all here to figure out kind of the same thing.
I the funny thing about what I'm about to say is it's a realization or not necessarily a realization but a observation that I made during Thanksgiving.
Okay.
On Thanksgiving, I was at Kemper's place and I was spectating a lot of conversation. Um and something that kind of hit me about spirituality in general and certain aspects of it is that it is very egotistical
Mm.
and people tend to talk about destroying the ego and all of this, but then it always wraps back around to this grandiose thing for me. It's grand for me. And it throws me off a lot when I hear people talk, because it's like, well, why is everything so great just for you? And it mostly comes from the talk of like reincarnation, right?
Mm.
Because when, let's say, like, whatever, right, you start talking like, I must have been some like wise monk, right? Well, now you're talking about your ego. That's your ego. It's like, why do you think you were someone so great in your past life? Why couldn't it just be something that you have locked in right now? Why can't it be something that you understand? Like, some people are born and they pick up math a lot easier, or they don't. Why isn't it? Why do you have to believe that, oh, I only understand this because someone else did it before me? But then how did that other person do it? They figured it out. Okay, so who was the first fucking person to figure it out? Nobody, because apparently you're reincarnating all the time. But you're figuring out this, like, you're using these grand things and it's building up a spirituality ego that makes you feel greater than the world around you. when you shouldn't be doing that, and you should be humbling yourself way more. It's like, but at the same time, you're also, which I can see also now, how what I'm saying could be egotistical at the same time, because, and this is a spirituality ego. It's like, okay, well, I was reincarnated from some great fucking person who knew all this shit. Or you can look at it as like, well, I'm kind of figuring it out on my own. Which one's more humble, though? Saying,
Well,
I was gifted this great fucking soul because I'm just so fucking great.
Why is humble better? Like, why is lowering your self-image somehow?
It's not lowering your self-image. It's accepting that what you are given is what you are given. You don't need an answer for it. It's like, why do you, okay, so like, do you ask a apple tree why it grows apples? No, because it just grows apples. That's not lowering the image of an apple tree. It produces delicious fruit. And you can even know that apple tree, if it was conscious, could even know that it produces great fruit. But it doesn't, like, it doesn't have to have an answer to its existence. It's there.
You know what's interesting?
What?
Now that we're just gonna go down a little random rabbit hole. An apple tree and like all things are actually conscious, because if you look at like how it grows, like it grows
Well,
to
you know what I
survive.
mean in terms of conscious.
I know, I know. I'm just It's just something that I thought
Yeah,
about.
you're getting
Anyways,
convoluted. But to go down that rabbit hole some more, there are some, we've talked about it before. There are some crazy fucking experiments with how trees communicate to change their flavor profiles and shit and all this other crazy stuff. I don't know.
but
I see this, like, I see so many people talking about it, and when they talk about it, it's also the tone that they take. It's like a higher tone. It's like,
it's a happy enthusiasm, bro.
it doesn't
It's
sound like that. It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like, I don't know how it sounds, but it sounds like people are like, I'm higher than most. It's like, I
like
understand
you've
this.
experienced more.
Like, I understand this, and no one else really does. That's what it gives me. And it's like, especially when people are in a conversation and it's like they're only agreeing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's two egos that agree and they're just boosting it.
Yeah,
It's like, why? But if you have like a
it's
spiritual thing going on, right, in a conversation, what doesn't make sense is for it, reincarnation, let's say, right? It doesn't make sense for two beings who were both reincarnated into two different bodies to agree on every single thing in a conversation and then say, like, oh yeah, we're both reincarnated from this really great fucking smart person because I just understand this stuff. And it's like, it doesn't make sense to me, and it throws me off, and it gives me the ick when I hear it. And so part of that conversation on Thanksgiving, I was like, oh, this is what's gonna be going on. Okay. I'm like, and so I kind of like zoned out a lot of it.
funny.
But
It's funny because there's two different filters like going through. You know, I look at it almost like a filter, right? Of
okay.
your experience and like what you so like you hear it in like a distorted way. Just like if we put like a Star Wars fucking voice changer over my shit and all of
And
a
see,
sudden.
now you're not even, you're also throwing it away from you. You're taking your ego and you're like, I'm not wrong. And you're saying it's you because your ears are wrong.
I'm saying maybe we're both right. You know, like maybe that's right for you. You know, and that it's gonna
But
make
can you
sense.
hear where your ego comes in?
100%. But
Yeah.
to me, I also look at it like wonderment, you know, and a deep sense of knowingness, and like it makes sense to me. So when you explain to me how it makes sense for you, it's like interesting to me. And I'm like, oh, so like you get it this way, but I get it this
No, I
way,
don't
and
get it at all because I only
yeah,
pick up
well,
ego.
I clearly understand that,
I
and I
pick
love
up
you.
ego and self-centeredness, and it's like, what the
Oh
fuck?
yeah, because
It's
I
like
think
that's
I'm
what throws me
important.
off.
I believe that all of us have like within us a piece of the universe, and like everyone's world is different, and that we're all here to like create within this space
Well, yeah,
of the
what
world.
you're made
You
of
know?
has always existed. And that is a fact of like a scientific fact too, if for anybody who doesn't believe in spirituality or anything like that. I've always said that I'm not a religious person, so those conversations don't really have anything interesting to me. So the science part, when you explain things, is like more interesting. And so when you look at it, all the eggs that a female holds, she is born with that amount,
Bro, my
right?
mom was talking to me about this today. Continue. That's fucking awesome synchronicity.
So when a woman is born, they're born with the amount of eggs they're going to get. They do not grow more, they don't make more, whatever, right? And so you her mother was born with the same amount of eggs that she was going to have for her entire life. Those eggs created your mother. And then her mother's eggs, which were given to her at birth, were created by her mother. So your great grandmother created your grandmother out of the things that her mother gave her. And so it's a fucking stair step of things that you have always existed in different forms and different matters. And it just came down, which also is kind of funny because that also means you are, which is kind of an interesting thought. The majority of your like celestialness or universalness, whatever you want to call it, the majority of that comes from your mother. It is a realization I just had. Because her eggs have always existed, sperm recycles. If a man was only born with a certain amount of sperm, then okay, you could do the
But it's
same thing with the mother.
because you're also like acknowledging a spirit, right?
Yeah.
Being and like
I'm not saying spirit.
consciousness, well, like consciousness being like the essence of life, right?
I'm not even saying
Um,
that.
okay. So you're
I'm
just
saying
talking about
material.
matter,
Material.
material.
Yes.
Okay.
DNA, which
Um,
has been proven to hold fucking information, so you could call it a consciousness, but we're going to say material because that's what I was talking about.
it just seems to me like you're i- infusing like this idea of non-physical matter being like conscious matter, right? Nothingness, essentially, turning into somethingness in the physical to me.
Explain that. What do you mean by what I
So,
mean?
like, so, like, the spirit finds its way into matter and is then born when this matter, being the egg and the sperm, create a portal for that life to kind of like come through.
Okay.
And um, it's just interesting to me that this is a very like purposeful conversation and very, in a sense, like teetering on the edge of, religion and where you exist when you're not physical without like you're like not quite dipping your toe in there. You're just skimming the surface. And it's just interesting. It's interesting
It's
to me that you can
because
accept that
I
thought, which is very hippied out and very close to what like other people and other religions in a sense would kind of think of, or try and explain life through that lens with like
I
also refuting a ton of shit.
It's because there are too many questions with most modern day religions that I have that can't be answered in a satisfactory way to appease my mind that makes me want to even believe or acknowledge that. Because the same way that you and I are talking to each other right now, we can misunderstand, misinterpret, and mishear each other is the exact same way I think most religions are. They're misheard, misinterpreted, and misunderstood from the very beginning. I am not saying what you read in your Bible now is being misunderstood. I'm saying what Christianity was at its root, at its very beginning, is being misunderstood, misheard, and misrepresented. And I can't join a religion when I believe that it's not being fulfilled the way that it was originally meant to. Because there are very few religions that I know of that have an unedited version of their holy text. And there's only one that I know of, and it's Islam. The Quran has never been edited. But the
see,
Bible is constantly has new shit.
this
And
comes
so,
to
but at
something
the same
that's
time,
interesting to me.
here's the
How
other
do you
thing.
know
Hold on,
anything,
hold
though?
on,
How do you know anything?
hold on. At the same time, beyond, let's say beyond the religious text, right?
Yeah.
All religions are so similar that that's also why I believe that they're misunderstood, misread, and misrepresented. Because most religions have the same thing as like Christianity, for example. They have a 3-step process. They have 3 things. They have your spirit, they have your in between God, aka Jesus, and then they have God itself, right? They all have a heaven, a purgatory, a hell, and then your physical existence. They all have these very similar things that are, but then they also are all argue that they're right. It's like, hold
So
on, you all have the same fucking aspects of religion in your thing, but you're all saying they're wrong because the names are different.
but I have a question.
What?
Okay. So this is my question. Is like, what is the end goal of religion? It's experience of connectedness, oneness, and purity. You know, um, through your spirit in a way that you can feel, and that's how you know it is through the experience of it. And it's something that is clearly like gonna be interpreted and explained differently because everyone's experience comes differently, although it's the same experience in a sense. Um, and that's the trippy part. Like that's where, to me, like that ego aspect dissolves out of it, and like fascination and wonder and true belief of like this person's experience, and how they're explaining it or trying to like put words to something that's just a visceral connection where all the things, like, it just makes sense. You just know. Um that's kind of like what they're trying to translate for you. And these religions and sects and like, they're all just trying to, these belief systems bring you to living life in a way of like connectedness to
Mhm.
that. And so I think it's interesting, which kind of makes me ask you, like, how do you know anything? Well, you know it by experiencing it. Like, you just know something. How though?
How are you gonna
That's
ask me a question and then answer it?
that's the fascinating point of it is like, how do you know anything?
Why do we need it explained? Why,
It's just
like that?
I
That's
think
like I get people's want to like understand the world around them and feel like they need to have an answer as to where your thoughts come from. Like you think it's a collective consciousness, and that's where your thoughts come from. But what if, like, why does it have to be? Why does it have to be something so crazy that it's almost unfathomable about how it even works, right? It doesn't make sense. And so it's
but
like,
why should it not be that crazy? Why should it be so explainable? That's what I don't understand either. It's the same thing that you're saying turned on its head.
yeah,
Like, and it
exactly.
goes
You can
both
do it.
ways.
We can do it in circles. Like, so why does it have to be so simple? Why does it have to be so complex?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be either. It's just based on what makes you feel at peace with your existence. And this is what I've said on the podcast so many times. Religion, spirituality, whatever it is that you believe, is simply something you believe so that the world around you makes sense and doesn't destroy your mind. That is essentially what it is. You believe these things because you need that to feel comfortable. You need this grand purpose to feel comfortable with your existence and even the level of suck. Like when people way back in the fucking day, before most people could read, people had to figure out why the fuck weren't their crops growing? Why were their cattle dying? Why was this happening? Where'd the water go? Right? These things are all natural things that we see nowadays. Droughts, we see famine, and these people didn't understand those things because most people that long ago could only speak 500 words and didn't know how to read. There probably weren't very many books back then. And so what they're doing is they're explaining their existence in a way that makes them feel good. It's like, "Oh, this grand thing is this thing that knows more than me, created everything around me and me, is doing this to me." It's
So
making their existence, their suck,
you
bearable.
you you just hit something that makes is a great way of explaining, like, if you've experienced living a lesser way of life, right?
Mhm,
And you experience a better way of living life, then you would seek to live that way. And if
mhm.
you figured out the formula for it, then you would go back and repeat that formula. Well, what if the formula that causes matter to manifest and take form and things to happen is driven by belief and focus? Consciously choosing to believe and to focus in a certain way.
Well, that's taking a step away from religion because that you're putting your thoughts into action.
But that all comes down to the interpretation of religion, you know? And if you look at it like as literal or metaphorical, and what it's really like leading you to is something that, and it's really interesting because you can read a book like Think and Grow Rich right here by Napoleon Hill, right? And it will explain to you a lot of like how consciousness works. And quantum physics is kind of like catching up to explaining this very thing, um, in a way that seems to be more palatable to people than the old way of explaining things, which would have been kind of through stories. And religion and things of that nature. And I think it's really interesting. Excuse me. But to me, like I look at that and it's like it it can't be taken away in a sense from the ego because that's kind of, and I don't really enjoy that term in that I would replace it with like self-awareness and like what you self-identify as in relation to what your like nature truly is, right? And overcoming that, like, and I just don't think that we come into these bodies and live these lives in any way, shape, or form on accident. Like, I truly think there's a level of like scriptedness and like framework to life, um, that we come in to experience in a body that we can't color too far outside of the lines of, because we don't really want to. We actually want to experience it in the way that we're living it, and we're always gonna choose to live it a certain way, based on our nature until we overcome it. And that can be something that there's really like people will be like, well, there's no way to prove that, and maybe you're right in saying that, but it's just something that I have experienced myself. Um, and I don't know that it's that way for everybody. I don't know that people even notice things the way I notice things. Like if numbers and patterns stand out to people the same way that they stand out for me. And some people will be like, oh, that's confirmation bias. But to me, I look at it like that's conscious influence on a design, really
You,
like reflecting back to you what you're projecting. And that
I've
might be
told you
way
this
too.
a lot, um, and I've told a lot of people this who try to tell me that numbers mean something. And here's why. Before you decide you want to go on your tangent about numerology and stuff, numbers are man-made. And the reason I believe that is because they didn't exist before we brought them up, right? 1 through 0, 1 through 9, whatever, 0 through 9, right? Those are all created. And because there's only a finite amount of them, that means there is only a finite, although very large, amount of combinations you can make with those 10 numbers, right? Those 10 symbols. There's a very few amount of ways that you could do it in the grand scheme of things. And so you're inevitably going to see patterns. There are going to be repeats of something. There's always going to be. And so I don't believe that the numbers themselves are as great as you want them to be. Again, it is a thing that makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
think it can be
okay. I want
I
those
think
things to make you comfortable, and I don't want to like make you think like, oh, this fucking
well,
bullshit numerology shit. I hate this shit now. I don't want you to think that. I
I
want you to
I just
believe in
look at
whatever is comfortable, but I want you to also question the beliefs that you have more than anything that you question in life, and not
I
to
look at
question them in a way that is um not that's confirming your belief, but genuinely makes you rethink it.
I feel that this is just belief and non-belief in action, or belief and belief in a
It's
different
it's
way.
belief and
Taken
belief in
two
a
different.
different way
Yeah, yeah, and I
because
think this right here, what we're doing, is the essence of freedom,
but
and
this
this
is
is the greatness of fucking America. So we're not just throwing stones at each other because we don't fucking believe the same
but we're
shit.
also not shitting on each other.
I think this is dope though, like
Yeah.
in a way that like um it's underappreciated, and because it can be a frustrating and like never ending thing. And this is kind of a perfect example of what humans fucking do,
Hmm.
you know? And reaching a certain point where it's like someone's got to pull the parachute, you know? And it doesn't mean that there's a right or a wrong. It's like two very different vibrations can exist in the same spot. And that's just like a physics level. Like eventually they'll separate in one way or another, or like the tension will become like too great.
Yeah.
And there'll be like some sort of repelling. And I find it interesting. And I hope that there's someone that watches this podcast that sticks it out long enough. And it's if it's my cousin Chris Rivera, what up, Mister Icky Woods?
What up, Chris?
I'm curious as to if a listener can get through this, or if they feel that rift within themselves,
Yeah.
and if they gravitate towards one side or another, or if it's too much, because navigating this territory is where we're at in civilization. It's where we've come to in democracy that we have not figured out how to navigate
What
and how to accept.
conversation?
Um,
Or it's
two, uh, like opposing beliefs, or like not being able to explain something adequately from one side to another,
Mhm.
a level of different ways of thinking and living and being while creating structure. You see what
Yeah.
I mean? And I look at that as like what our country's doing and what this world is really trying to do, as the energy behind it, because there's just so much more people, so many more thoughts, so much more information, so many more options pushing behind this and giving momentum, that it's like trying to figure it out quicker and quicker is almost like becoming this daunting thing. And I'm hoping that we learn how to peacefully accept and embrace freedom in a new way for the future. And whatever that looks like in terms of structure, I don't know.
Yeah. The structuring, like it's hard to structure human beings to begin with. And that's why most governments are problematic. And so it's like in essence, it'll never happen because we're just monkeys that are a little bit smarter.
And
That's
in the
essentially
words of
what
the
it
great William Wallace, freedom!
is. Until episode 100, guys.
Yep. Anyone that got the sneak peek